May you live in interesting times. And Dan MacKenzie, the president of the Canadian Hockey League, is certainly living in interesting times. Let's face it, these may be the most interesting times in the history of the entire CHL, with the recent NCAA ruling about eligibility of CHL hockey players for Division I hockey. I think you're like me, we have a lot of questions. Dan MacKenzie himself has a lot of questions about how this is all going to sort itself out by next season and beyond. And while all of this is happening, there's a lot of balls in the air right now. We don't know how or where all of them are going to land. The CHL is staging a pretty cool event, the November 26th and 27th in London and Oshawa next week. It is the CHL USA Prospect Challenge, where on the ice you'll see probably half of the first round of the next NHL draft. Before you hear from Dan in a couple of seconds, I want to thank Carl Pratt and the Beaches Brewing Co. for hosting us at this wonderful place. So let's have it. This is Dan MacKenzie, the president of the CHL, on the sheet. Okay, coming down in 3, 2, and Dan, good to see you again. A busy time, a really busy time for you. I want to get to the CHL USA Prospect Challenge in a couple of moments here, but the big story, as NCAA has changed their regulations or how they view CHL players, the ripple effects are being felt everywhere. Everybody has questions at every level, players, managers, operators, parents, fans. It seems as if there's a sort of big fog over all of it, and no one really knows how it's going to end up when the fog lifts. Let me start this way. Is the fog starting to lift? Are we starting now to see what this is going to end up looking like with all these different relationships?
I think the fog is starting to, but I think, the reality is it's going to take some more time. The interesting element to this is that, again, this is not, I've been asked by various people about, the CHL NCAA negotiation around this. And I have to stop the folks and say, listen, this is not, there's no negotiation. This was an NCAA rule that the NCAA changed. And although there was lots of signals that this was coming, until the text of the resolution was read and you could really understood what you were talking about, it was hard to make exact decisions on what to do. So I think what you're seeing now is people are beginning to make decisions based on the reality of what was in there. But there's still a lot of unknown questions. And so we're in the process of determining how we go forward on a variety of topics. But in some cases, we just still need more information. And so, I'd say that, if this was a hockey game, we're probably still halfway through the first period.
Right. Historically, there's always been a recruiting war, for lack of a better term, between the two sides. How would you describe the nature of recruiting right now, or the conversations around trying to sell the CHL program versus sell the Division I program, given that we all understand where this thing is headed next August? Is it a temporary ceasefire? Is it a pause in hostilities? I know I'm drawing a lot of aggressive analogies here, but how would you describe what's happening with recruiting between the two?
Well, I think probably the place to start would be that, if you're talking about it from a hockey league perspective,
yes.
Let's take that to the side for a second, CHL, NCAA, whatever, and just think about the player. And I think if you look at from the player's perspective, we think overall it's good for the players and it's good for their families. So, and you've got kids who are playing elite hockey. Like at 15 years old, to have to make a decision as monumental as playing in, the best development league in the world, or foregoing that because you have an opportunity to maintain your eligibility. We think that having not to have to make that decision anymore is good for players, and we think at the end of the day is going to be good for the game. So we'll start with that. I think. All we can really focus on our side is making sure that we're, doing what we do in terms of providing the best experiences for our players. And that includes on ice development, making sure we've got the best facilities and the best coaching staffs and the best training and schedule and opportunities to kind of get better as a player, to prepare you as a hockey player for playing pro. And we think that we do that better than anybody else. And then on the flip side, as a student, we need to make sure that we're doing the best by our players in the classroom, making sure they have the right academic opportunities. That if you come into the CHL as a B student, you're not going to leave as a D student. You're going to be B or better, those kinds of things. And I think that's an area where, for us, we're spending a lot of focus with our academic advisors on this new world, because we never really before had to worry about, what are the eligibility requirements to get into the NCAA, to get into NCAA schools? What's the differential between various schools, et cetera, and we're going to have to. So we're really in learning mode, I'd say, on that side of it, to make sure that by next season we can be in a situation where we can really add value to our players on the academic side, because that's an area that we haven't, and NCAA specific, we haven't really been focused on.
From the sticking with the hockey player, the decision to play in the CHL, the decision to play NCAA, we all sort of see how this pyramid is shaping up here, and I agree with you. I think this is wonderful for players, more options for players, better development overall. One of the things that I do wonder about, and a lot of people have wondered about, is the 19-year-old hockey player. And the 19-year-old hockey player knowing how important high-end 19-year-old players are to the CHL. The idea of trying to keep them in CHL programs and not, squiring them to the NCAA earlier than perhaps some operators would like. When it comes to keeping 19-year-olds in the league, is everything on the table? And I want to couch it this way. There was one first-round draft pick that I know of who had that decision to make, and one of the things that he asked is, if I go to the CHL and not the NCAA, can I transfer my academic scholarship to a family member? I don't know what's on the table for keeping people in CHL, but are you finding that a lot of your thinking now has to be differently creative than it was before?
Absolutely. I mean, this change is, well, you might know the actual, it's 43 years, 44 years that the rule got put in. It was in the 80s. It used to happen. I was in Kitchener yesterday, and I was looking at their wall, and they have all their graduates, and there was there was U.S. commits, and then they just stopped in like the early 80s. So if you're talking about 20 something years, this kind of a rule is monumental change, and so to think that we're going to operate the same way we've been operating for the last 20 years in a world where you've got that kind of change is just ludicrous. So absolutely, we have to get creative, and we have to think about what the right pathway is for our players. We do think that and again, no one really knows exactly what's going to happen in terms of how player movement's all going to work. But we think that we're pretty well positioned to be a really, really high-end league, regardless. And then we're going to be a great place for the 19-year-old player to develop and to get ready for, again, whether it be pro hockey or NCAA or USports or Europe. So we don't think that's going to change. And so we're really focused on that right now. But I think when you look forward, and let's project out 5 years, I think it would be safe to say that our commitments that we're going to make to our players are going to be very different than the way they're set up right now. I think that's just going to be the reality of it.
You mentioned European players. Do you think at the end of all of this, the CHL ends up getting more European players?
Well, I think if you look at the historical commits for European players to the NCAA over the years, it's really been rising in the last probably 15 years. And so I think the answer is yes. And I know that may have some implications on us in terms of, because right now we have a limit on the number of European players who can be on CHL rosters. So we may have to look at that. But
I was going to say, would you lax that?
We might. I think we've got, that would be one of the, when you talk about the fog lifting and what changes we're going to make, I think that might be on the table. We'll see. But I do. I think that not only will, I think there's going to be opportunities with European players, and I also think there's going to be opportunities with some families, probably on the other side of the border, who never would have thought of playing in the CHL before. because of the strength of NCAA hockey and the lure of that. And that might have a bit of an effect as well.
One of the things that I thought of when the vote happened and things changed was the Memorial Cup. And thinking, okay, any successful market, I mean, there's a number of boxes you have to check, whether it's facility, whether it's accommodation, financial, and also quality of team. Given that some players could go early, do you think that will be, and I'm thinking obviously of Medicine Hat, do you think that poses a risk for the CHL when deciding on a Memorial Cup host city?
Potentially. I mean, it's a part of it. You sort of laid out that we have 4 quadrants that the Memorial Cup site selection committee focuses on. So business operations, hockey operations, community and theme, and then facilities and infrastructure. And so but the hockey operations piece is a big piece. As of today, it's hard to it's pretty hard to project out, 18 months out in terms of what a group of teenagers are going to be like as a team, and that's that's the decision that's where we're at right now. And we use the NHL. Colin Campbell and Dan Marr and Central Scouting spent a lot of time with us on that site selection committee, evaluating each of the teams that's bidding. And they'll tell you it's very hard to do even today, let alone with the rule changes. So I think what becomes more important in those scenarios then, or in a future state, would be the quality of the GM, quality of the owner, quality of the coach, in terms of their ability to build teams that are going to be able to be competitive year in, year out. And so I think that becomes maybe a little bit more important, but it could have an impact for sure.
I reported not too long ago that 2 teams from the USHL had approached the Ontario League about joining, or maybe what the process was or how it could work. First of all, am I missing any teams? And second of all, I know there's 60 in the CHL. Could it, would it, should it get bigger?
Well, I think it's probably a little premature right now to determine what's going to happen, in terms of teams going forward. It's been reported that our leagues are 2 of our leagues have started talking about expansion. On the specific OHL matter you're talking about, that would really be a question for Brian, in terms because those kinds of things happen at the league level versus the CHL level. But I think all I would say is I think there are. It's a very interesting time. I mean, I've only been in this job in this world for 5 years, and the amount of change that's gone on in 5 years has been unbelievable. And I think that when you look at having a rule change like the rule change with the NCAA eligibility, the ripple effects of that could be pretty wide ranging, and it could affect a variety of different aspects to the development pathway. And what the future of the junior hockey infrastructure looks like is definitely going to change. And I think right now I don't think we're shutting down any opportunities. But we do need to learn a little bit more about the effects before we get too deep into, how many teams are there going to be and where they're going to be and that kind of thing.
How often would you, if at all, have conversations with the USHL, the BCHL as well? These are, 2 leagues that are seeing just the beginning of some attrition from their leagues into the CHL. We'll see what happens next season. But how much of an open dialogue is there between the leagues, if at all?
At the league level? So I would say probably more with our U.S. counterparts. I think the BCHL, given their sort of the reality of where they sit right now in the system, there hasn't been a lot of formal dialogue. But I think on the USHL front, we have through it's actually been through the NHL. The NHL organizes every year. They have a conference where they bring in all the various leagues in the system. And it's been through that process that I've had a chance myself and my colleagues at the leagues have had a chance to meet with folks like Pat Kelleher at USA Hockey and Glenn Heffernan at USHL. And again, I'd say we have good relationships in terms of just working relationships. There hasn't been any sort of broader discussions on any matters of the kinds of areas you're talking about. But the relationships are good. I think we're all trying to figure out what the implications of the rule change are. And all of our leagues are meeting, pretty regularly on what those implications would be and how we're going to change to be able to meet the needs of tomorrow's player.
One of the things I think that a lot of people have wondered about one day down the road, should there, the USHL competing for the Memorial Cup.
Way too premature, I think, honestly, to talk about that. I think our leagues are structured so differently. And so I think that kind of talk is just very premature at this point. So I wouldn't want to even speculate or get quoted as, hey, the CHL is talking about this. There's been no discussion on that. We're really happy with the way the Memorial Cup works right now. 4 teams, host city, 3 league champions. Are there changes we can make to the Memorial Cup down the line to make it better? We're always looking to make our events better, absolutely. But there's been no discussion on our end about bringing another league into the mix.
You mentioned you've been in your role for 5 years. Since then, we've seen 3 new commissioners, and for the first time in recent memory, all 60 teams got together. How was that discussion? I mean, overarching all of it. I mean, texting with people and talking with people, the whispers were all about, the reality of CHL players in NCAA. But what was that like? And why do you think it took so long for it to finally come together?
Well, I think first of all, it was great. I mean, to get everyone in a room was really great. And one of the objectives, honestly, of the meeting, Jeff, was to just get people to meet each other. We've had owners, some owners, members of the CHL who had been, they've owned their team for 25 years and had never met another 25-year owner from another league. So and we sort of set it up in such a way that there were sort of 2 sessions, one at night on the Wednesday and one on Thursday in the morning, and we rotated the seating so everybody got a chance to sit with, through the 2 sessions, different people, and we set up some things where people had to talk to each other. So I think just purely the idea of having owners sit down and talk to each other and share stories, and there's a lot of demand after to make sure that we shared the contact information of everyone who was there so they could stay in touch. I think that was really important. But I think we really spent a lot of time. We spent a lot of time on some of the issues of the day, as you and I have been chatting about. But we wanted to share some data on various aspects of our business to make sure that everyone was up to speed. But we wanted people to understand and feel that they were part of something bigger than maybe than their individual league, and that they are members of a 60-team organization and not just an 18, 22, or 20 team organization. And so, the topics we covered, we talked a lot about really the role of the CHL and what that could look like going forward. We talked a lot about the CHL brand and where does the CHL brand fit in connection with the leagues. We talked about things like standards. Should we have some national standards in certain areas? We talked about vision and values, and should we have a common set of vision and values across all 3 leagues? So really fundamental, basic sort of building block types of things. And so we've got a bit of a to-do list coming out of that in terms of, before we get together again, how are we going to action against some of those things? We're not there yet. We've got to do a lot of work. But I think, the idea that we can work together as 60 in a bit more of a coordinated fashion seemed to be a common theme that people were really receptive to.
This is an exciting time for the CHL. As you mentioned, it's a changing time. And you mentioned brand a second ago, and the CHL brand. And what does that mean now? With 3 new commissioners involved. And this is not a slight on Ron or Dave or Gilles from previous, but there's a weight of history that they carried with them in their position. Do you find that now you're in a position, you have a strong sports marketing background, as we all know, to do things with the CHL brand that perhaps you weren't able to do before?
Yeah, I think first of all, you mentioned Ron, Dave, and Gilles, and they're legendary careers, Hall of Fame type careers, and are have done a phenomenal job for junior hockey in this country and in the U.S. So kudos to that group. I think that one of the things that we're dealing with our group is that we have everyone's new. So I'm actually the most tenured one, which is scary amongst the group. But in terms of being in junior hockey, but every one of them comes from a business background. And I also think that, the reality is none of us are going to have the kinds of careers that Dave, Ron, and Jill had in terms of tenure. I don't think anyone thinks that we're going to be in these jobs for 20 years. And so I think there's a bit of an impetus to movement and action in the areas that make sense. And it's not just about the people who are in the commissioner's roles or myself. We have 60 constituents we have to work with. So I think that there is opportunity, I think, and I think there's going to be a window for us to do some things, but I think we have the right people in place. Dan, Brian, and Mario have been excellent to work with so far, and I think we just have to identify, okay, what are the things we're going to focus on in terms of the CHL aspect of my role and their jobs, because they've got day jobs as commissioners of their leagues, and let's just go get it done. So I think that's going to be what our next steps are going to look like there.
In talking with the 60 different ownership groups, 60 different operators, was there sort of one theme of questioning, concern through all of them? Like, was there one thread that sort of runs through? Because listen, 60 teams is hard. Like, this is cats and laser pointers. I get it. Val-d'Or is different than Calgary, is different than Barrie, is different than Vancouver, is different than Charlottetown. All have their unique challenges and different things that they want to do. But is there one sort of common thread of interest through all of them?
Yeah, I think the reality, Jeff, is that the common thread, honestly, is the desire to offer great experiences to these players and their families. Like, hockey and school. Everyone does it differently. I mean, not everyone's everyone. The way that experience gets delivered is different across all 60. But there's a common, I'd say, belief in the fact that developing players and making sure we do right by our players and their families is the most important thing. I think, given the timing of the meeting, which was October 16th, 17th, I think it was, a couple weeks before the NCAA thing. The NCAA issue was on everyone's mind in the breakouts and there was a lot there was a lot of talk on from everybody, and that was really, I'd say, probably the dominant theme. And then like I said at the beginning, I think the other theme was just, I think, an interest in getting to know each other. Again, this was really early days. I mean, the group of folks we had in that room had never been in a room together before. So I think that was just having that, the dynamic of people sitting beside each other and having side conversations on issues that were important to each of their franchises one-on-one was a really invaluable piece that we heard a lot of in the feedback that we got after the meetings.
Let me get to the prospect challenge, because I think this is a really cool idea. I mentioned not too long ago on Twitter X that on the hockey calendar, like capital H hockey, pick all the leagues. This is one of the coolest events. Like, I looked at this one selfishly and said, like, oh yeah, like this is something you can sink your teeth into. For the longest time we said, the future of international hockey is Canada versus the United States. And we've been saying that for 20, 25 years, and here we are. What was the genesis of this one? Because this is the old top prospects game. But now there's a added intrigue or an added sort of layer of the rivalry between Canada and the USA. And then again, on top of all of this is the NCAA ruling about CHL players. Like, in a lot of ways, like this Rubik's Cube is sort of all coming together at the right time for it.
Yeah. So the genesis of it was once we got through COVID and some of the craziness that was marked by the beginning, my first few years, we started to look at our national events. So right now we have the Canada-Russia series got parked for obvious reasons. And so we started to think about, okay, what does our national event portfolio look like going forward? And so I'd say there's two pieces to it. I think we think the Memorial Cup, as I said earlier, is the right event to be doing the way it's operated now for now. There's a prospects game, and then we used to have Canada-Russia. So we're still down an event. So we're still in the process of figuring out what that third national. We'd like to have a third national event at some point. We're still working on that, so we don't have anything to report there.
If you'd like to break some news, like, go ahead.
No,
microphone's right in front of you.
I'd love to be able to break some news, but we don't have any yet. But we're working on it. But on the prospects piece, one of the things that one of the realities of that age group, and you would know better than most, is the best draft eligible prospects from the CHL and the US never traditionally have played each other. So at the World Championships, Canada doesn't send its best team because we still have players who are playing in the playoffs in the CHL. And then the U.S. sends their best to the Worlds, but in the summer for Hlinka Gretzky, that group is turned over, and they're on to the next group. So it was never you never have the sort of the best on best playing each other. And so our thought was, what if we modified the prospects game in such a way that we had the best players in the U.S. playing the best players in the CHL. And so we approached USA Hockey about it, and they had an interest in exploring something. So we did a 3-year 3+1. So we're going to rotate the games amongst the 3 Canadian leagues, and then through it's OHL this year, Dub next year, and then the Q after that, and then the U.S. will have an opportunity to host if they choose in year 4. And we'll see how it goes. But we think that it's from the perspective of talent on the ice, we think that the skill level is going to be off the charts. I mean, if you look at the draft projections, more than half of the first round is going to be on that ice when these two teams play each other. The Misas and the Martones and the
got to throw Schaefer in there. He skates like Bo Meester. You got to throw Schaefer in there.
Yeah, I was in Kitchener last night. Cam Reed. There's going to be some really good players on the ice, and so we think from a fan's perspective, seeing these best players compete is going to be great. But I think the added element that's really neat is there is going to be, unlike, I don't want to say unlike an All-Star game or a prospects game, because our important night for those players, but of a bit of a different, I'll say, edge to the game. And we've heard how important, talking to our players as well as hearing from players on both teams, how there's going to be something on the line here. Players care about the systems they come through and where they're from, and so I think you're going to see a bit of that Canada-U.S. edge.
I agree.
And we think from a fan perspective, from a media perspective, and honestly from a scout perspective, the amount of interest that we've gotten, and we talked to the NHL a little bit before we sort of put this game together. They had lots of interest in seeing these two teams play each other, and they really liked the idea of having it happen over 2 games versus just 1. So the traditional prospects would be 1 game, and the fact that this is going to be a 2-game series was something that they're really excited about.
Okay, I'm going to get way ahead of myself here, and you're going to say, well, whoa, the fog hasn't lifted yet. But could you see a day where, as part of the U.S. development program schedule, they play against CHL teams?
It's way too early. You called it. I don't know. I think
things have changed, right?
Things have
changed. Why not?
I think you're projecting into a world where, again, we don't know what the infrastructure is going to look like. So I think it's way too early to say. I think for us, I think for USA Hockey, having the opportunity to play in the Prospects Challenge against the top players in the CHL was a really good opportunity, just from the ability of them to play high level games. And so there's definitely a desire for that. But I think it's too early to say. We've had no discussions with anyone about something like that. That hasn't been a topic of discussion.
It's interesting you mentioned the scouts, and that's one of the first groups that I thought of when this idea of the Prospects Challenge, CHL US. I would imagine that a lot of champagne bottles around Dan Marr's office when all of a sudden, him and his group can see all these players. I mean, it's got to be half the first round that you're going to see in London and Oshawa on the ice at the same time. Like this is new territory here.
It is. I think the only thing that Dan's going to get a bit of grief over is the fact that it's a week of U.S. Thanksgiving. So guys are going to have to fly on U.S. Thanksgiving. But outside of that, yes. I mean, I chatted with Dan a fair bit before we decided to move forward with this game, and I think, again, as I said earlier, the 2-game element to it, but just I'd say the expected compete level of the game, and then the talent, all those 3 things combined, I think is going to make this a scout's dream.
I talk a lot about getting caught in the gears of history, and when things change, there's unforeseen events that no one saw coming, and I want to get to that in a couple of seconds. I wonder about USports through all of this. I mentioned USHL and BCHL previously, and unfortunately, anytime anything like this changes, and this is a seismic shift, the gears of history, some get caught up. How sensitive are you to that?
sensitive to it. We've had multiple discussions with USports about, and we've kind of kept each other in the loop as I said earlier, there was this reporting that we were in negotiations with the NCAA, and I wanted to call Pierre and indicate to Pierre Arsenal, USports, no, that's not the case. This is an NCAA decision, and we'll adjust to it. I think from a USports perspective, USports has been an important destination for players in the CHL for years, and I think when you talk about the fog lifting, I think one of the things my personal belief is going to be that I think the USports is still going to be a really great option for a lot of players. I think especially for kids who maybe know that an NHL career is not going to be in their future. If you're from Canada and you want to stay close to home, play high level hockey, and get a jump start on your career by using your CHL scholarship, I think USports is still going to be a really viable option. And so I think there'll be some adjustment in terms of where the players go. And I think what will end up happening is I think under the CHL, I think that you're going to see some alignment. I think Junior A is going to become more aligned with the CHL going forward. I mean, it's been the top end junior player has been sort of keeping their options open for NCAA. I think with the change, that may change, and you might see a bit more of an alignment in the CHL system, or in the development system. And then I think if what ends up happening is there's going to be some players going to play NCAA, I think that'll create opportunity, and I think it could create more opportunity for Canadian kids maybe who wouldn't have had an opportunity from the CJHL, as an example, to take advantage of some of the opportunities at USports.
Okay, last one for you. I'm not arrogant enough. I'm pretty arrogant, but not arrogant enough to think that I understand everything here. What is everybody missing through this story? Is there one thing, like I've wondered about, I keep reminding people, like, hold on a second here. It's not just going to be a tap in someone wants to go play at Wisconsin or Nodak or BU. Like, there's still an education piece here as well. And that tends to get overlooked. But is there something out there that you say, hang on a second, everybody's missing this one part of this CHL NCAA story?
I think it's hard to predict what these decisions are individual decisions by individual families, right? And so I think when you hear people say, this one thing is going to happen unilaterally across the board, so whatever it is, an impact on a league or a destination, or all players are going to do this, it's just not true, because each player has to make a decision in terms of what's best for their career, and also the situation that they're in. I mean, if you have a player who is in a really good situation on their major junior team, and they finished high school, and there's discussions, you hear people say, there's going to be an exodus. It doesn't take into account that player who's got a really good coach playing a great role. The next year, the team's going to be good. They're going to be a captain or an assistant captain. They're going to have a chance to win a league championship and go for the Memorial Cup. Those things matter, and so I think that that's one thing. I think there's a bunch of unknowns around. There's still a lot of uncertainty around NIL and what can, as a Canadian, what can and can't you get. I think there's lots of sort of evolution there in terms of what the implications are. And I think there's also still a lot of, especially for us, we have a big blind spot right now in terms of NCAA regulations and what, and that range from a variety of areas in terms of what players can and can't do and what players can and can't get from their CHL teams. So
So you're cramming for an exam.
Yeah, we really are. And so I think there, and we're leaning on people who can help get the answers, and then we can try to make the best decisions we can. But as I said off the top, I think the most important thing is if we can continue to be the best place for 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old junior hockey players to develop both on the ice and off the ice and in the classroom. If we can do that and continue to do that and improve, across all aspects of those three things, I think that the chips are going to fall, and I think we're going to be in pretty good shape.
Very much looking forward to London and Oshawa. Great timing, should be a great event. Looking forward to both games.
Great. And if folks want to go, we got their tickets still available, chl.ca/prospects challenge.
Awesome. Look forward to it. Thanks for taking time, Dan.
Thanks, Jeff.